All right, good afternoon, guys. I am very excited to talk about what I have to talk about today. It's something that I definitely struggle with. It's crazy the amount of issues that I have with this problem, and it's not just discipline. You know, we heard in the last message a great definition of what discipline is, okay? But there's one thing I'd like to add. If you remember, we talked about discipline is not necessarily being something that is a punishment, but rather a training to prepare you for something, you know, a little bit of like a procedure that makes you better at something. But I want to add to it that it makes you better at something so that you can continue in the discipline. Mm-hmm. Discipline isn't something that just because you have gotten better at it that you stop. Now, getting into the topic of what we're going to talk about today. I have a story to tell you, and let me just whet your appetite. It's a pretty great story, and it involves, I'm very thankful that Tori brought up SeaWorld because it involves SeaWorld. So just keep that in the back of your mind really quick. I'm going to bring up the topic. We're talking about the discipline of listening. Now, you might ask me, well, what's important about the discipline of listening? That doesn't make any sense. Why do I need to get better at listening? Well, let me give you a definition of what listening is. Now, it may seem very simple. It may seem, I know what listening is. It's just processing, you know, auditory information using my ears. But it's much more than that. It's not just hearing something. You can be listening to me today. You can be hearing the words that I'm saying, but being a college student, I can tell you that just because I'm listening to the professor doesn't necessarily mean that I'm actually listening to the professor. I don't know how many of you can agree with that. So it's responding to what you're hearing. It's reacting to the things that you hear from people. It's responding to those things. Okay, let me tell you this story. You guys have all heard of SeaWorld, correct? Okay, now there's this like Canadian version called Marineland. I don't think we have Marineland in the States, but I was like 7 years old, okay? I don't know how many of you went through this phase, but when I was a kid, there were these periods in my life where I was like obsessed with something. Some kids, it's like trucks or dinosaurs or whatever. For me, it was whales. Okay, I don't know why. You can call me a weirdo. I just really like whales. It was weird. I was into dinosaurs and trucks too, but for some reason, I loved whales. Okay, and there was this movie that came out, I think it was in like '93, called Free Willy. You guys seen that movie?
Yes.
Okay, this movie was the holy grail of my life. Okay, so it's basically about this kid who's like a delinquent. He's like, you know, getting into trouble. He's like breaking and entering. I don't advise that. And he basically breaks into this marine park, and there's this whale, and he like grows this bond, this like friendship with this whale. And basically what happens is he starts working at the park. He gets upset because the whale's in like this small tank. And he's like, I want this whale to be in the ocean. And so like the final scene is him like running across this like rock pier. And he's like, Willie, Willie! And the whale like somehow knows where he's at in the water and like jumps over this rock wall. It was crazy. It was like the most amazing thing in the world. Like I wanted to be that kid. Okay, so fast forward. I'm like 7 years old, and me and my family, and well, it was my mom and one of her friends from work, and like her daughter. We were 7 years old, not time to be dating yet, we're just friends, 7 years old. Anyway, so we're driving up to Canada. This is before you needed a passport. You could just kind of cross the border. And we get to this Marineland, okay, and I'm like freaking out because I know I'm gonna get to see Willie. Like I'm gonna get to see this whale, I'm gonna touch this whale, it's gonna be awesome. Okay, so we get there, and like the way this park worked is like you had like everything, like all the different things. We're looking at the sea otters, the sea lions, the other sea with other animal names that come afterwards, and just polar bears, all these animals. And the way that the park was made is that it kind of like funneled you through so that at the end was the big attraction, the whale, the orca whale. That's what they were called. They had like these white eye patches that looked like bandits. It was really cool. Anyway, and so there was like a show where you got to see them do tricks, and then but beforehand you got to like pet them, you got to touch them. And so we had this line, right? There's this huge line. We waited in it for like 45 minutes. Just me, little 7-year-old me. We finally wait. We're getting up there, and I'm next in line. For some reason, I was allowed to walk up there without my mom. I was like, okay, cool, because I could only do like one person at a time. And I'm like getting up there, and the trainer's like talking to me, like, hey, don't, just be careful, this is a whale. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And so, and so she looks away, and I'm like, you know what? This is my time. All of my hopes and dreams are about to be fulfilled in this moment. I cannot wait. So I hop up on that. I was like 2 feet tall. I don't know how I did it. But I hop up on like the railing, and I'm like reaching out for this whale. I'm like, the culmination of my life, what I was born for, is about to be fulfilled in this moment. And as I'm hopping up there and I'm reaching out, I hear my mom, like, Sean, what are you doing? And immediately I'm like, shut up. Don't get in my way. This is my whale. Okay, I'm free and willy. You leave me alone. Okay, and so she's like, I just blocked her out. I just tuned her out. And as I'm reaching forward, I'm slowly like can feel my legs slipping a little bit. And I'm like, no, I don't care. This is the whale. I'm gonna touch this whale. I'm a free willy. Okay. And so as I was, imagining it in my mind, all of a sudden, sure enough, I fell in. So little 7-year-old me fell in the whale tank. Immediately, all my dreams and aspirations flashed before my eyes, and I was sure that I was going to die. I didn't know how. Either I was going to drown, or this whale was going to swallow me. I was only like 2 feet tall. Probably could have didn't even need to chew. It was weird. Anyway, so long story short, the trainer pulls me out. My mom freaks out on this trainer, and I'm pretty sure. I don't think it was because of me, but I'm pretty sure that they don't allow people to touch the whales anymore. It may or may not have been because of me. I don't know. But moving on, how does this apply? Okay, how does this apply? One of the reasons why this is important, the discipline of listening is important, is first and foremost because Jesus thought it was important. The phrase, "He who has ears, let him hear," appears 17 times in the Bible. 15 of those times in the New Testament, with the majority of them being in the Gospels. The rest of them are found in Revelation, where, of course, as you know, it's a revelation that Jesus gives to one of his followers. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. And Jesus thought this was important. We can see that. Even in his action of getting away from the disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane to hear from God, to receive a revelation from God. Listening is important. So for that reason alone, listening is important, is because Jesus thought it was important. In Hebrews 5:11, people are talking to others about the importance of solid food versus basic food, that kind of stuff. And he says, about this we have much to say, and it is hard to explain since you have become dull of hearing. And it goes on to say that in the next verse that you should be teachers by now, but we've resorted to having to give you basic food because you are dull of hearing. It says you should be teachers by now, but we've had to resort to giving you basic food. I'll repeat that verse again. It says, about this we have much to say, and it is hard to explain since you have become dull of hearing. In Matthew 13, some of the the disciples had come to Jesus and said, why do you speak in parables? Why don't you just tell them the truth, plain and simple? And Jesus replies, to you guys, the mystery of God has been revealed. You're blessed in that. And he says, but for other people, and he says in verse 14, or we'll start at verse 13. It says, this is why I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. Indeed, in their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled that says, you will indeed hear, but never understand, and you will indeed see, but never perceive. For this people's heart has grown dull, and with their ears they can barely hear, and their eyes they have closed. Lest they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and turn, I would heal them. That's my first point today. If you're taking notes, take this point down, is that a disciplined listener exercises understanding often. I'll say it again. A disciplined listener exercises understanding often. I've been reading my Bible for I'd like to think many years now, and I'd like to think that I have a little bit of a basic understanding of it. But that's not something that I just had out of the blue. That's something that I worked at. That's something that I trained, I exercised. Tori gave us a definition that discipline is training. It's not punishment, but it's working over and over again, getting something over and over and over again, training yourself up. Understanding is the same way. If you were to go to someone who's like a math professor who's been studying math for years, they're not going to say, yeah, took all these crazy concepts and understood them immediately. They're going to say, I studied over and over and over again. It's the same thing with listening. It's the same thing with the discipline of listening. Because if you don't listen, you can't understand. And to practice understanding, you have to listen. So that first point, a disciplined listener practices understanding often. They exercise it. Now my second point, and this is relating to kind of what happened with me at SeaWorld in Marineland. I was on the edge of that tank and my mom was yelling at me, Sean, what are you doing? And immediately I was like, shut up, Mom, I'm free and willy. Shut up. The second point, if only I could go back in time and preach this message to myself, I might not have fallen in the tank. Second point says, a disciplined listener does not wait solely for someone else to stop talking. See, my mom was yelling at me, and before she could even get her sentence out, I was like, shut up. I don't want to hear what you have to say because I know that I'm right. A disciplined listener does not wait solely for someone else to stop talking. How many times in our prayer lives have we, instead of letting God talk to us, it's just us talking? I can tell you so many times that there have been times where I have been praying, and instead of listening to God, it's just me praying. It's just me speaking to Him instead of with Him. And I'm going to be honest with you, I think that that's a huge problem in the church because growing up, when I've heard of the idea of prayer, it's always been talking to God. Do you talk to God? Prayer is listening as well, just as much. A disciplined listener does not wait solely for someone else to stop talking. Proverbs is full of wisdom on listening. Proverbs 18:13 says, if one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. It sure was my folly and my shame when I fell into the whale tank because I didn't listen to my mom yelling at me before she could even get her words out. Even in the chapter before, Proverbs 17:28 says that even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. See, a big part of the discipline of listening is the discipline of shutting up. And I talk a lot, so that's something that God was like, this is you. That's a big deal. And even in James 1:19, it's a pretty famous verse. It says, know this, my beloved brothers, let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. We all learned that growing up in church. And you can assume that the opposite of that is be slow to listen, quick to speak, then what? Quick to become angry. You can say that there are many times where I've gotten into problems or I've gotten angry with someone because I didn't let them get out what they were saying. I love to debate. I love arguing. I don't know why. I think it's just because I'm small. I have a big mouth, kind of like overcompensation. I don't know. But there have been many times where I haven't gotten the full picture because in the entire time that I was talking with someone, I was just waiting for them to finish their sentence so that I could reply. How about instead of having an answer to homosexuality, we say, hey, what went on in your life that led you to that? What happened in your life that made you feel that way? How about instead of having an answer to abortion, we say, hey, what are you going through right now? Are you afraid? Like talk to me. I want to hear what you're going through. Instead of just saying, you know what, God doesn't agree with that. Just because you're right doesn't mean that you need to share that. A disciplined listener does not wait solely for someone else to stop talking. And this leads into my last point, and if you don't hear anything that I say today, I want you to hear this. This is my last point. It says, a disciplined listener translates what they hear into action. A disciplined listener translates what they hear into action. James 1:22 says, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves, but do what it says. God doesn't want people that are just going to listen to Him. He wants people that are going to listen to Him and then put what He has told them into action. I can read the Bible all day long. I can labor with God in prayer all day long. I can labor with my friends when they're talking to me about something that they're struggling through all day long. But if I don't act on what they've told me, then all I am is like someone screaming at a wall. And the wall doesn't respond. I can scream at this wall for 24 hours a day and I won't get a reply. We don't want that. We don't want to be those walls in people's lives. We want to be someone that's going to respond, someone that's going to help them, someone that's going to respond to what they say. Matthew 7:24 says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who has built his house on a rock. The discipline of listening. If we practice that, we are like wise men who have built their houses on a rock. Strong, steady, secure. I just can't think enough about how cool it would be for people to think, because this person listened to me, I trust them. How much more will people be willing to share with you what they're going through because you took the time to listen to them instead of just throwing this in their face? And lastly, in Revelation, this is my favorite verse on this topic because it's so vivid and full of imagery. It's Revelation 3:20. This is Christ saying, "Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him, and they with me." I will eat with them, and they with me. Think about that. What's the action there? It says, if anyone hears my voice and what? Opens the door. I will eat with them and they with me. You know, we spend so much time talking with God or talking to God that we miss the fact that, you know, Christ could be standing there saying, "Here I am. Stop talking. Just open the door." That's all you got to do. Just open the door. Listen to my words. Listen to my words. That's why the discipline of listening is so important. And I cannot stress enough that, you know, the discipline of listening involves the discipline of shutting up. I know I said that before. Just going back to these 3 points. The disciplined listener exercises understanding often. Don't just listen to what you hear, but understand it. Secondly, a disciplined listener does not wait solely for someone else to stop talking. And lastly, a disciplined listener translates what they hear into action. Now you may be sitting here and say, okay, you told me why listening is important. You told me that I should have it, but how can I put that into effect? Because, you know, I can know these things, you know, if everyone's looking at me, I can know these things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I know these things. And I have 3 ways to make us all better listeners. And the first is to make listening an act of worship. And you may say, how does that even relate? You know, like, what? That doesn't make sense at all. You know, when you're listening to God, listen with it as an act of worship. Saying, you know what, God? I listen to you. Okay, I trust you. I hear the words that you're saying. You better believe that that's an act of worship. Even with your friends, your coworkers, your family. If you truly love God, you truly love what He wants for you and His purpose, everything becomes an act of worship. Secondly, make listening an act of faith. When you're listening to God and you're hearing the word that He's telling you, have faith that the things that He's speaking to you are going to be carried out. And again, the things that He's speaking to you for your friends, for your coworkers, for your family. And the last thing before I close, listen with a mind to act. You know, I said that we shouldn't be listening with the intent of having something to say as soon as they finish speaking. But listen with the mind to act in the sense that, you know what, I'm going to be there for this person if they need me to be there. If they need prayer, I'm going to pray for them. If God calls me to help them out financially, I'm going to be there for them. I'm not going to throw the Bible in their face. I'm not going to throw my righteous life in their face. I'm just going to listen. And then I'm going to act. I'm going to respond. So if there's any of you in here, like me, and I say that again, like me, who has problems with this discipline of listening, I'm just going to pray really quickly that God will give us all ears to hear. Father, I just thank you for how good you are and how much that, no matter how many words that we use, how much we ramble on in our minds and in our anxious hearts, Father, that you listen to us. And I pray that you would give us ears of the infinite, Father, ears that hear and act and respond. Father, show us how we can listen today. Show us how we can discipline our ears to hear the things that you hear, that our hearts may be burdened for what burdens yours. We thank you for all that you're doing and for all that you're going to do. Amen.
All right.